they tend to rebel very hard.
Why do you think it goes from that to, I need to prove that Mormonism is not just false, but it's harmful?
They want to save people because they think the church is wrong.
I will say that sometimes I feel like the CES Letter is proof that you don't need intelligence to become rich and famous.
I would say that it is perfectly reasonable and normal for two intelligent people to read the same information and walk away with different points of view. It happens all the time.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sword and Spirit. My name is Daniel Sorensen. I'm here with my co-host, Tori. Today, we're really happy to have a special guest, a good friend of both myself and Tori. Her name is Sarah Allen. Sarah has done numerous stuff with an organization currently called FAIR. She was formerly employed with Scripture Central and has done a lot of great work on a 60-plus part on the response to the CES letter addressing criticisms towards the church. Sarah, thanks so much for being on.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, just tell us a little bit about yourself. A little bit of a bio for you, but just tell us a little bit about who are you, what got you involved in the apologetic realm, just so our audience can come to know who you are a little bit.
Okay. Well, I have been a history geek since I was rather young. And my dad liked to give us nonfiction books as we were growing up. And so I read a ton of history. And when I was in middle school-ish, I started really getting into history. And I started getting into church history in particular. And so I read everything I could find. I was super interested in it, and I just dove into all of that. And so when I was in college, that's when I found Fair and Farms. And so I was just amazed that there were people that actually researched church topics for a living. You know, I could not even believe that people actually did that. And I thought it was so cool. And so I dove in and started reading lots of Farms stuff. And I read, at that time, FAIR was still a message board. And I never created a handle and logged in and participated or anything, but I read a lot of stuff on the message boards. And then, it was always just a hobby, something in the back of my mind. You know, I never really focused on it a ton, but it was a hobby, and I kept up to date on some of the arguments and some of the newer research and stuff. And then I was inactive for a long time. And then Heavenly Father basically told me to get off the fence and use the talents that he gave me and actually, help build up the kingdom and stuff. So I came back, and I was poking around on Reddit, and I stumbled across the Mormon subreddit, which is just a dumpster fire.
The cesspool of r/Mormon.
Yeah, I was like, holy cow, is this how the church is represented on, But then I saw that there were there was a post directing people who wanted a more faithful point of view toward two other subreddits. So I went over there and I started reading through a lot of them, their posts and stuff, and then eventually I made an account and started responding. And then I made some friends, and eventually I ended up as a moderator of the LDS subreddit with somebody who is high up at FAIR, and I will not name them because I don't want to dox them. But somebody high up at FAIR also helped run it. And anyway, we just had a ton of people, lots of trolls dropping in saying, read the CES letter. And we had lots of people who would come by and just say they had been reading it and were really shaken by things in it. And then sometimes they were sincere, and sometimes they just started arguing with everything that you said because they were just pretending. And we just got a ton of people talking about it and stuff. And so finally I was like, you guys, it sucks. It's not that big of a deal. So I started writing a response to it, and it was not meant to be like a comprehensive thing. It was just kind of meant to be like a little overviews of certain topics and resources of where to go and to find it. But then people wanted like a line by line thing, and so it morphed into that after a couple of weeks, and it just took forever because it just keeps going. But anyway, the person from FAIR took those posts behind my back to Scott Gordon, who is the president of FAIR, and showed them to him and said, if she's willing, can we repost these on the blog? And he was like, yeah, they're great, go ahead. And so that meant doxing myself. And they had already tried to dox me several times on some of the other subreddits. And they actually thought I was Mike Ash, which was hilarious.
Oh, okay.
Sarah Allen, my gosh.
I know. I'm like...
Both surnames start with A. There's a match.
No, it was funny because we write nothing alike. Like, I have a ton of respect and love for Mike. I think he's wonderful, but we sound nothing alike. And, like, I had been very clear that I am female. And so then I had one of my friends, DM me, on one of my Reddit friends, DM me of being like, I always thought that you were a woman, and, I'm not judging you or anything, but if you are Mike Ash, you can tell us it's okay. And I just about died laughing. I was like, what is this? Like even some of my friends thought that I was like pretending. So anyway, they started being reposted on the FAIR blog, and that's when they really blew up.
That's great. And let's I just want to back up a moment, just kind of, because there are a lot of people I think nowadays know what the CES letter is, or at least aware of the name, and a lot of people have heard the phrase anti-Mormonism, and so this specific episode that's going to be released is really diving into a little bit of what anti-Mormonism is. So the first question I have is for people that may not know what anti-Mormonism is. Let's talk about that just real quick. What is anti-Mormonism, and then we'll talk a little bit about what the CES letter is.
There are people who leave the church and who just walk away quietly, and it's not a big deal. They're just done with it. And that is the majority outside of Utah, by my understanding. In Utah and in other heavily Latter-day Saint populated areas, they tend to rebel very hard when they leave. They tend to go on like drinking binges and start doing drugs and drinking coffee and like flaunting the fact that they're not a member of the church anymore. And I don't really understand why. I guess they felt oppressed, and so they're rebelling and acting out. But a small faction of those, not even most of them, a small faction of them get very angry and very bitter. And they are the ones who start going on social media and just writing all kinds of negative, horrible things and saying negative, horrible things about the church and spreading it around and just doing everything they can to attack the church. It is a large enough minority that they have done a lot of damage to a lot of testimonies.
And they are loud and insistent.
Yes.
So in regards to this specific crowd of people, they oftentimes will engage in certain arguments where they feel hurt or they're angry. There's a variety of complex real emotions that are going on. And just real quick, talk to us a little bit about that. Why is it that the resentment, the anger towards the church, and sometimes is, I would say, even justified, depending on like their own experiences. Maybe their child was abused by a church leader. Totally understandable. Like this shouldn't have things like that shouldn't have happened.
Oh, of course.
But why do you think it goes from anger of situations that happened, their own experience of what happened, or their experience of their child, experience of their loved one? Why do you think it goes from that to the LDS Church is a cult, that it's not just not true, it's not good, it's harmful to families. It's, Joseph Smith was a fraud, he was a womanizer. Why do you think it goes from just the pain that they feel, the resentment, the anger, and the real pain that they're feeling? Why do you think it goes from that to, I need to prove that Mormonism is not just false, but it's harmful?
I think there are a variety of reasons for that. Sometimes it is just genuine pain that festers over time and builds up into something. Some of it is we are so ingrained with like the missionary mindset of spreading the gospel that when they're on the other side, they want to help people and pull them out of it. And other people, I think, just want to justify their decision to leave. So I think every case is different, and I would not label anybody in particular without knowing the details of their specific circumstances. So
I like that, and I haven't really thought of it that way before. That in the church we have this very proselytizing idea. Us and our evangelicals, brothers and sisters, have a very strong, belief of the Great Commission to spread the gospel. I could definitely see why certain members that are more antagonistic towards the church, it's a very similar, mindset.
They want to save people because they think the church is wrong.
Yeah, wrong, harmful,
evil. And so they want to save their loved ones from that.
I think that's also a great segue. Just like we established, there's certain groups of people, and some it's very real pain, some it's they engage in or attempt to engage in rational debate, or they go the route of trying to prove the church are wrong, and specifically with the proselytizing tool or mindset is, I think, a great segue into the CES letter. As the CES letters, I would say, is probably what the most modern proselytizing anti-Mormon tool that's used. And for people that don't know what it is, Sarah, what is the CES letter? Who is the author of it? Okay, talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay, so basically it is a document that is a list of all of the things that the author thinks are wrong about the church. All of the things that he thinks he has proof are wrong. It's basically just a laundry list. There's nothing really new in it. Like it's all the same anti-Mormon stuff you've heard for decades. Like a lot of it is actually plagiarized. He quotes without attribution entire sections of Grant Palmer and Sandra Tanner and
just like copy and paste, basically.
Yeah.
Control V, man. We love it.
Yeah, and a now defunct anti-Mormon website called Mormon Curtain and like Mormon Think and things like that, just pages lifted wholesale.
Dang.
But the rest of it was written by a guy named Jeremy Reynolds. He ended up leaving the church and became very bitter over it. And he said that his goal in writing it was to save his wife and kids from Mormonism. So it was basically to pull his family out with him, to persuade them. And his grandfather was really worried about the change that he saw in his grandson and asked him to talk to his friend who was a CES director. And so it was the letter to a CES director originally, and then it was just shortened to the CES Letter over time.
And CES stands for Church Educational System, correct?
Yes, yeah. He like ran the seminaries and institutes in his area, basically.
Which is pretty much not saying a lot.
No, it's not really a position of authority unless you're a seminary or institute teacher, you know.
Right.
So I'm not sure why he ended up presenting it as if it was like this high up church employee who had like authority to speak on behalf of the church or something. Like it was.
I just want to clarify that we're not dragging on people with real pain, especially with the church.
No, not at all.
However, I will say that sometimes I feel like the CS letter is proof that you don't need intelligence to become rich and famous. But with that being said, and with that probably getting clipped,
We'll see.
Yeah,
But-
like I will not argue with you on that because some of the arguments he makes are real bad.
that's actually what I wanted to go to. Like, what are some of the worst arguments you've heard, and what are some of the better arguments?
Oh goodness.
Or I guess with that, I mean, if there's a specific topic, for example, I have it pulled up right here. In the CES letter, we have his introduction, okay, to specifically the CES director, and then he lists specific arguments such as Book of Mormon translation, the First Vision, Book of Abraham, polygamy/polyandry, prophets, Kinderhook plates and translator claims, testimony and special witnesses, priesthood restoration, witnesses, temples and Freemasonry, science, then his conclusion. So is there a specific part in it where you feel like it's either a very much a misrepresentation of what Latter-day Saints beliefs are, or just it's not a good showing that it's not a good source of if I want to research Mormonism and I am not a member or I'm a guy struggling with my faith, why shouldn't I take the CS letter seriously? What specific section shows that I shouldn't take it seriously, or should I take it seriously?
I have a hard time narrowing it down because they're all real bad.
Okay.
So one in particular, he recreates these maps from this guy named Vernal Hawley, and the goal is to say that Joseph lifted town names from other cities around him, and it was so weak that he actually put up on Reddit when he was revising it. And he was like, I think I'm going to pull this out because it's so terrible. And it's so easily debunked and it's the worst part of it. So I think I'm going to pull it out. And then he left it in because people in the comments were like, no, that's the part that really helped me.
That broke my shelf, yeah.
Yeah. And so he left it. He was like, I'm either going to pull it out or put a disclaimer on it that I know it's not a good argument. And then he didn't do either one. He just left it. So that one, even he knows, is real bad.
Dang.
There are other places where he goes on this whole big long thing, on the Vernal Hawley maps. There is an Indian reservation in Canada called Rama. And so he goes through this whole thing, and he keeps badgering on why there is no evidence of a battle at the Hill in New York. And he goes on and on and on for pages. And then on his map, he places it in Canada.
Okay, I'm from upstate New York. We will throw hands if you mistake us for Canada.
It's but he places the hill in Rama, in the Indian reservation. And I was like, but you just went on for 10 pages about how it has to be in New York. And there are other things too. I mean, he does a lot of circular reasoning, and he'll one of the main things that he does is he will rant about something, and he'll just say that it's false. And then later on, he'll like build on it and be like, since we proved that false here, let's do this. This must be false too, and then this must be false. And he never at any point actually proved any of it false. He just said it was false, and then used that as proof later on. It's just bad arguments. Like, he gets a lot of the history wrong, and he gets like that contradict known historical sources that we have that are like up on the Joseph Smith papers that you can point to and say, actually, this is what happened. And like, he twists all kinds of things. There's the copyright thing where Joseph received a revelation to send some people up to Canada to sell the copyright. Yeah. But it wasn't the copyright of the text, it was the printing copyright. Like how Harry Potter is printed by Bloomsbury in the UK, and then I forget who prints it here, HarperCollins. Somebody else prints it here in the U.S. because we have different companies, and so they own the copyright to publish the material, but they don't get to like change it and like make it their own. The author still owns the copyright of the actual work, and so then he tried to make it be like, they were selling the actual copyright of the Book of Mormon itself. Yeah. And like he just went off on like how this was this big failed thing. But if you look at what they actually said, the people who went on the trip thought it was a success, even though they didn't actually sell the copyright, because it was a conditional revelation, and we have a copy of the revelation showing that it was conditional.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. Go ahead.
Isn't that copy canonized as well in Doctrine and Covenants, or is that outside of the canon?
It's not in the canon, no.
I can't remember where I read it.
You can read it in Stephen Smoot and Brian Passantino's book about revelations that are uncanonized.
That whole thing is, I think, very interesting, pointing, because kind of like what you're saying is a lot of these arguments, they're not new. For example, one of the ones that I spent a bit of time studying a few years back was, View of the Hebrews, which is used because, like, for example, and I'm just going to quote real quick and here. So in the CES letter, he puts that there's two columns. There's the View of the Hebrews column and the Book of Mormon column side by side, and he says, okay, so the View of the Hebrews was published in 1823 with the first edition, and the second edition being published in 1825. The Book of Mormon was published in 1830. The location that he puts forth for View of the Hebrews was in Vermont, and it was in the Rutland County. And then he says he puts a note, and he says Oliver Cowdery, one of the Book of Mormon witnesses, lived in the Rutland County when View of the Hebrews was published, and was part of the author Ethan Smith's congregation. Is the argument that he puts forward, and then he says, and then with the Book of Mormon, it was. This part's a little bad, but he says it was published in the state of Vermont, in Sharon, Vermont, which, that's bad research right there.
Okay, but not
Go
even
ahead.
just that.
Mm-hmm.
He links, I don't know if it's linked on the website, but it's linked on the PDF to the title page of the Book of Mormon where it says it was first published in Palmyra.
Interesting. Bad research, but
You shouldn't laugh, but
it's okay. We'll get flamed after this one. It's okay. Okay. So some other parallels that he makes is the destruction of Jerusalem and both. So some parallels we see: the scattering of Israel, the restoration of the 10 tribes, Hebrews leaving the old world for the new world. Religion is a motivating factor. Migrations of a long journey, encounter seas or many waters. The Americas are uninhabited. Settlers journey northward, encounter a valley of great river. A unity of race, or Hebrew, settle the land, and our ancestral origin of the American Indians. And there's a lot more. I'm not going to go through all of that. And I found this very interesting because as someone that actually has studied that, there are more differences and parallels. What it seems that this is suffering from is, first off, if you're concerned about View of the Hebrews, I encourage anyone that's listening to read it.
But
Oh, it
don't
will put you to
actually-
sleep in 10 seconds.
Oh,
It
was
is so bad.
Their chapter 3 is super boring because it's Ethan Smith making a case for more of a logical case of why the Native Americans are of the 12 tribes of Israel, and all it shows is Ethan Smith and Joseph Smith, no relation at all, that they had. This wasn't an uncommon idea.
No, it was a fairly common idea in the 19th century. So he pulled that list from B.H. Roberts, who created that list at the request of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles and the First Presidency. They asked him to play devil's advocate and come up with attacks against the Book of Mormon that they hadn't seen yet. And so that was his list. And he says repeatedly, like he gives a disclaimer right at the beginning of this thing saying, these are not my thoughts. I do not think any of this has any merit. I'm just listing all of these things that somebody might take issue with and might
Still meaning the critical
raise.
perspective, per se.
Yeah. So a lot of them are reaches, like the destruction of Jerusalem. In the Book of Mormon, it's talking about the one in 600 BC by the Assyrians. And then, Assyrians. And then the one in View of the Hebrews is talking about the one in 70 AD by the Romans. So they're talking about two completely different events.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with all of them. Like there are hardly any actual parallels when you actually dig into them and you see what they actually are.
And
Yeah.
if you're curious, the church has a PDF of it and publishes it for free.
Yeah. That's how worried the church is about this. They actually publish View of the Hebrews.
When no one else wants to. Yeah.
And there's also in dispute whether Oliver Cowdery even knew
Yeah.
Ethan Smith,
Yeah.
and whether his family was a member of the congregation at all under him.
What I think is interesting too is I remember reading. I think Joseph Smith published in or there was a statement I believe that Joseph Smith made. I need to find it, but Joseph Smith he published it. If I'm correct, he actually publishes View of the Hebrews later on in his or he at least talks about it later on in his life as evidence that more people this idea of the Native Americans being, of the 12 tribes of Israel, being God's people, when Joseph found something like this, it was exciting, and frauds don't do that.
Right.
If I'm plagiarizing, if I'm not just if I'm stealing ideas, but if I'm specifically plagiarizing specific parts of View of the Hebrews, and I'm going to use it as for my own book, I'm not going to want to publish.
You're not going to want to call it
Extracts from it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because that's a gold mine for anyone that's skeptical, and I find it very interesting that this argument of the View of the Hebrews did not come till way later. In Mormonism Unveiled, I could be wrong, but I don't think this was even it wasn't. I believe wasn't this not until Fawn Brody? Wasn't Fawn Brody one of the first ones that kind of jumped on this correlation between View of the Hebrews and the Book of Mormon?
I don't remember who was the first to jump on it. Stephen Smith would know for sure. But it was much later. It was, I believe, in the 20th century.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or very late 19th century. It just wasn't an argument that anybody at the time was making.
And just all these things, it's very interesting because there's certainly these ideas that just kind of don't necessarily hold water when you really dive into them. But that's not to say that there aren't questions that are like, okay, like let's address this, because obviously we've left a little bit. We don't want to hurt anyone's testimony by
Right.
saying to just disregard these arguments. But it's
All
Right.
three of us here have struggled with these ideas in one way or another.
To a degree.
to a degree.
I said one way or
Yeah.
another.
I'd say to a degree, but I think it's the underlying thing is there are certain claims in the CES letter that people may have real concerns about. Now we established a little bit of why the CES letter is not the best form of information. So, Sarah, if someone reads the CS letter, okay, and let's say they're concerned about Joseph Smith, the different accounts of Joseph Smith's first vision, or let's say they're concerned about how the papyri that Joseph used for the Book of Abraham translation, the modern Egyptologists say, oh well, that doesn't line up. So if the CES letter isn't an option, what is the better option to find answers to these kind of questions? Because they're real concerns, I think, that people
Especially
do
the
have.
youth right now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So the church has the gospel topics essays, which are a great start. And the gospel topics essay in particular on the Book of Abraham and the papyri do point out that we don't have any idea if what we have is the papyri that Joseph was translating or not, because most of the papyri burned up in the Great Chicago Fire. And if you study more, there is a great BYU Studies volume, 61, number 4, that was done by Stephen Smoot, Carrie Muhlestein, John Gee, and John Thompson, which you can buy in hardcover paperback if you want the hard copy, or you can read it for free online, and you can download the PDF for free. That goes through all of the Book of Abraham research, all of the most current research that we have. They did not put anything in that volume that they did not all 4 completely agree on. So there is more that 2 or 3 of them agreed on, and one of them was hesitant on that they left out. But it is all of the evidence in favor of the Book of Abraham, all of the latest scholarship. As far as the first vision goes, I would actually encourage people to go to the Joseph Smith Papers website and read all of the accounts, because they are fascinating. I love all of them. I think they're all very cool. And it's actually on the front page. If you go to the front page of the Joseph Smith Papers website and you just scroll down a little, they'll have first vision accounts, and you just click on that and it'll take you to all of the first-hand accounts, and then it will take you to all of the second-hand accounts that everybody has. They are just super cool. And Stephen Harper has done a ton of great work on that too. He's written several books about it that are both excellent.
A great one is, I believe I just finished reading it recently, but it's a guide to the historical accounts of the first vision, which is a great starting point for anyone that's wanting to understand. Okay, what do we have? What statements do we have? Primary, first-hand accounts versus second and third-hand accounts.
Yeah, that is a very good one. And his, I think it's called Memory in the First Vision, is excellent as well.
Yes, that whole concept I think is also very fascinating, because memory is as soon as you witness an event, your memory already starts to impose your own interpretation on it. That's just a natural human being. If you people that are interested in that, there's great. Study a little bit about cognitive psychology, and you'll understand that the way we interpret memory is not the same as it was, 10 seconds ago, a year ago. I remember that oftentimes the later account is, the less reliable it is, because we can even gain false memories. I have a memory where, this is a little bit off topic, but I think it relates, is especially when in regard to the first vision. I remember that as a kid, I remember having this memory it's actually a false memory, where my parents would tell me the story of when I actually slept. I woke up, or I didn't wake up, but I started sleepwalking, and they said I went over to the garbage can, and I peed in the garbage can. Now, I was asleep when this happened. I don't have any memory of this. However, because of the story that's been told to me multiple times, I actually currently have a false memory of this, of this event, and a telling of this event. And it just goes to show, and that's just one case of a number of cases in my life, and I'm sure you have cases in your life. Tori has cases in her life. Every person that has these situations happen to them, they impose their own interpretations on it, and some of these aren't necessarily the most correct.
Well, not even just that, but studies have shown that actually when you remember something, you're not remembering the actual event, you're remembering the last time you remembered it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that was, there's a lot to do with memory and a lot to do, that's why, and also as you grow older and you look back on things that happened to you when you were younger, you put different interpretations on them because you have more life experience.
More
and
maturity.
Yeah, more maturity. And Joseph certainly had a lot more experience with revelation and with visions and things as he grew older. And so he was able to recontextualize some of that stuff and like frame it better in his mind because he understood it more than he did when he was 14.
Yeah, we got to remember, this was a 14-year-old kid. They don't really know how to
Right.
use forks. Like,
Right.
he's going to understand more when he's older.
Exactly. And, people give Joseph such a hard time about, like, the plates in the Book of Mormon and stuff, but he got the plates when he was 21.
Yeah.
I know. Can you even imagine?
That's your age, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's my
Can,
age.
can you imagine being trusted with something like that at your age?
Like, that's why I'm
He
not a
was
prophet of God.
so young. And
Yeah.
I know that people kind of aged and kind of had to grow up
was
a
different
little
back then.
younger
Yeah.
back
He had
then.
already, like, lost a brother and all these things.
Well,
Right.
yeah,
but-
and there was the whole idea of, for the vast majority of human history where, the concept of teenager didn't exist. But
Right.
still, you don't know. He probably knew more than, like, your typical 21-year-old, but not by much.
No, not at all. And he certainly had less education. I just can't even imagine. And like trying to start a church and like be a prophet. You have no idea what you're doing. You're a kid.
And I think, that ties in specifically to assumptions that we have. And that leads people to assumptions about, anti-Mormonism or lack of it. And specifically, we've addressed like a few different criticisms of Joseph and how he don't typically respond to them. But I think there's also an assumption that oftentimes we as members make. And Sarah, at least in your experience or what you've seen over the last bit of years of doing apologetics and responding to anti-Mormon arguments such as the CES Letter, what are some assumptions that you've seen, like either whether it be anti-Mormons make or assumptions that we as members actually make that aren't as aware of this, that makes us more vulnerable to anti-Mormon material being appealing to us?
So one of the things that Jeremy does in the CES Letter is he takes these really kind of super conservative, super... I want to say fundamentalist, but I don't mean in the polygamist sense. I mean in the academic sense, where it's like really rigid, really traditional,
Yeah.
really conservative.
Fundamental.
So he takes things like young Earth science at face value, and then gets upset when he learns about evolution, and things like that. And so he just has he came to lean on the anti-Mormon material because he had these really rigid assumptions that if they were not true, then nothing in the church was true. And he didn't realize, like if he were more flexible in accepting, okay, maybe I was wrong about that. What does that mean for my testimony?
Re-examining your assumptions, basically.
Yeah, like he had a real problem with Joseph Smith's seer stone, like him having a personal seer stone, in addition to the Nephite interpreters and the Urim and Thummim. And he got really upset when the church admitted that Joseph had seer stones, but he didn't realize they'd actually admitted it multiple times in the past. He thought it was just happening just then. But he had this really strong idea in his mind that Joseph had to have only used the Urim and Thummim and not anything else. And if he used anything else, then that meant it was evil and wrong. And so that was one of his big things that I think really broke his shelf and really sent him over the deep end.
And you can kind of still see those assumptions just flipped now with his current work with the CES Letter and whatnot. Because he still holds those, like, I don't want to say fundamentalist assumptions, but it's kind of like
I would say it's a simplistic assumption.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
Brucey Haven has a model where he talks about when people join the church or people in our lives, we have a very simple mindset.
Yeah.
And a lot of people still do because we don't like ambiguity. So
Right.
often, whether it's Jeremy Reynolds or any member that has these traditionalist views, where they start in a form of simplicity and they eventually encounter complexity. You've described that very well. There's the CES letter is designed to get you in a state of complexity, I would say, and so now what you do after that makes all the difference. Do you work at it, and get to a form of simplicity beyond complexity, where you acknowledge that these issues are complex and there's going to be nuance there, or do you go the other route, which I've noticed a lot of people that are antagonistic towards the church do, or antagonistic towards religion do, and they don't get to simplicity beyond complexity. Instead, I've noticed that they oftentimes go back to simplicity, just on the other side. Instead of saying, I know Joseph Smith was a prophet, there's no way he could translate the Book of Mormon to, Joseph Smith stole it from all these books, from all these maps, and they go from that to, well, I know without a shadow of doubt the church isn't true because of X, Y, and Z. The Isaiah issues, or DNA in the Book of Mormon issues, Joseph Smith's polygamy, whatever the issues are, and I've noticed that a lot of ex-members still have a very simplistic mindset in their research too. And I think very telling, kind of I think you talked a little bit about, and to kind of just add on to what Tori was saying, that's kind of the assumption that is being made. The assumptions aren't really changing; it's just being flipped on the other side.
So a lot of times what they do when they are confronted with these issues that they never really considered before, some people just throw out the church entirely. And so they're like, well, if that part's not true, then none of it's true. Other people go ahead and try and get comfortable with the fact that there are questions, and there are questions that we are not going to get the answers to in this lifetime. Thankfully, there are not a ton of those questions, at least for the things that are necessary for salvation. But the way that a lot of scholars have approached it, and a lot of people who have been in the church for a long time and who have studied these issues in depth have approached it, is you just keep pushing through. You keep studying and you keep working on your issues until you resolve them. And once you resolve them, then it all just becomes simple again. Like my testimony these days is pretty unflappable. Like it is really hard to rattle me with any of this stuff, because I'm familiar with it all. I've read it all. I've read the responses to it. I can make sense of it.
It reminds me of what Richard Bushman said, where he said, I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said, if you're gonna know Mormon history, okay, or you're gonna know Mormonism, he said, I encourage you to dive into it head on.
And the thing is, people don't really read much anymore. And you'll see some of these YouTubers, that the anti-Mormon ones, be like, I studied this for 7 hours. And you're like, okay, that doesn't make you an expert. That makes you very far from it, It just makes me laugh. I'm like, because you have to put in years of study. You have to read. You have to dive in, and you have to read papers, and you have to read books. And it's not fast. It's not easy. But nothing that is worth it is. Like, you have to work for things that are important to you. And your testimony is one of those things that you have to work for. And sometimes you're going to get hit with something that you're not expecting, and that happens to everybody. And, it can rock you a little, and you have to take a little bit of time and, catch your bearing and stuff. But then once you do, you have to keep going. Because if you stop, then you're going to lose your testimony eventually.
it's also, I think, important to differentiate the difference between three things, and it's testimony, conviction, and conversion. Testimony is what we posit or believe to be true, based on our own experiences and based on our studies. I would also say, and then I'd say, then conviction is a trusting relationship with God, that of what based on our experiences with God, we trust Him, and we, kind of like what you said, we keep going because in
We have
Hebrew,
faith.
yeah, we have faith, and
Yep.
the Hebrew word for faith is amuna, which means to completely trust God, to turn ourselves fully to Him, and that's where conversion comes in. Where after you have a testimony, after you have a conviction, you are converted because you have this trusting relationship with God. And I think that goes very well to what you were just saying. You need to keep going, and all this here. It's not to discredit any historian or anyone that's made arguments against Mormonism, but it's to do your due diligence, do your research, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would not encourage anybody to dive in and read anti-Mormon material or to watch it or anything, because it just makes you feel gross and dirty and like you need a shower, and it's just it just makes you feel icky and like something's suffocating you. But I would encourage you to study the issues and to look to resources like FAIR and Scripture Central and Interpreter and B.H. Roberts and places like that. David Snell, he's fantastic. And look for explanations and ways to make sense of it. And, I mean, there are answers to your questions out there. You just have to look for them.
Yeah, I think that's really, really crucial. Really beneficial.
You don't have to become an anti-Mormon to study the issues they're in.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I've studied all of them.
And you're still here? What?
Wait,
I know, shocking. And, like a lot of our mutual friends, like Neil Rapley, Jasmine Rapley, Stephen Smoot, Ben Spackman. I mean, all of them, they've all studied this stuff, and their testimonies are all still intact.
What do you think is something that differentiates them from,
Jeremy Reynolds.
I think Jeremy Reynolds, we've talked a bit about him, but I'd also say people that I would argue that are smarter than Reynolds, and for example, Dan Vogel. Dan Vogel is an ex-Mormon historian, okay, that makes I would say he tries to make his best case for a naturalistic explanation. A lot of atheists love him specifically because he tries to make the best case for Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith being religiously motivated, but from a naturalistic explanation. So people that are aware of the information, but are on the other side, that we may be like, okay, like what can we learn from these guys too?
So I would say that it is perfectly reasonable and normal for two intelligent people to read the same information and walk away with different points of view. Like that happens all the time. It's totally rational, it's totally reasonable, and that is nothing to worry about. Just because somebody has a different opinion than you doesn't mean that they hate you, and it doesn't mean that they're wrong, like they're evil and they need to be shunned or anything. I think that it is well worth reading the arguments that Dan Vogel and others like him make, and then reading people who rebut him, and then seeing where you land. You do have to, I would say it is very important that you keep Heavenly Father in the mix and that you pray and you listen to the Spirit while you're doing it. But I think that, examining a question from all sides is healthy.
I like that. Examining it from all sides, I mean, I know that people that are antagonistic love this quote, but I think it's a great quote, and I would encourage anyone that's more antagonistic to really do their due diligence. And I think it's J. Reuben Clark says, if we have the truth, it's not to be harmed by investigation. And I would say, and I know, those that listening that maybe that may be more critical of the church, I would say, okay, then do that, and don't just go. It's the same idea of what kind of disciple are you being? Are you being a lax disciple, or you being are you
A diligent.
a diligent? Yeah, thanks. I think that's great. A diligent disciple. Where do you fall? It's like, where do you fall on the spectrum in your research, not just in your discipleship, but on your research? Because ultimately, I would say you need faith and you need reason to believe. We, as Latter-day Saints, don't believe that it's purely just faith. Both are essential for long-lasting faith.
Right. The scriptures talk over and over and over again about how the Spirit will touch your heart and your mind. And people tend to focus more on like the feeling of the Spirit, but the Spirit also speaks to your mind. And he also helps you learn when you're struggling to learn and you're struggling to concentrate. If you pray for help, you'll get it. And I have prayed to find certain sources, and I've found them in, like the exact words that I need to type into a search engine to pull them up will come to my mind. I have grappled with questions, and then the exact book that I needed to read, or the exact video I needed to watch, or the exact talk I needed to listen to came to my mind. And it's a very interesting thing. But if you loop in the Spirit and you loop in Heavenly Father while you are studying, he will help you learn, and he will help you make sense of what you're learning.
I love that. And we're running a little low on time, but just kind of to close, I'd love for you, Sarah, to just talk. If people that are listening are struggling, okay, we talked a little bit about organizations. We've talked a little bit about organizations that are helpful, but if someone's personally struggling with their testimony based on anti-Mormon material, what would you say to them?
I would say to pray a lot. I would say maybe take a break from the anti-Mormon material for a little while and let your mind clear a little bit. If you are reading that kind of stuff, you have to balance it out by reading your scriptures, by talking with Heavenly Father, by watching General Conference, that kind of thing, because you need a palate cleanser. And I think that just taking a break, going for a walk, going somewhere private and saying a quiet prayer, it really does wonders to help clear your mind and clear your anxiety. And, I would say very, very firmly, do not give up your relationship with God, even though you're struggling, because that is the most important thing.
Sarah, thanks very much for being on today. We really appreciate it. If someone wants to see your work or find your work, specifically, your CES Letter response, where can they find you?
You can find my stuff on FAIR, on the FAIR YouTube channel. I do have a podcast that I co-host called Me, Myself, and I. That's where you can find me, is at FAIR mostly.
Awesome. And we'll be sure to, for those of our viewers that are watching, we will make sure to put Sarah's work, specifically her, at least the beginning to her blog on the CS Letter response, as well as the podcast Me, Myself, and I. So we'll be sure to link your other podcast on plural marriage, but yeah, we'll make sure we link that all. So Sarah, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun.
Everyone, thanks for tuning in. This has been Sword and Spirit with Daniel and Tori, and we will see you guys next week.